Good afternoon. Last year we were out here, we had on the other field, and we had a very, very drunken crowd. I don't know that anyone really heard what was said, although I'm not sure it mattered to anyone that they didn't. We are here, though, today for a very serious purpose, because we can be whoever we want to be individually. But the question is, what kind of country we're going to live in, what kind of county we're going to live in, and whether that's going to happen by itself or through our efforts collectively. That's the issue. Now, for too long, too many of us have been relegated to a state of stupor, willing to absent ourselves from anything that went to defining the common good. We have to change that. And we're standing here today to begin that process as we were last year, the same place. What's at stake? Well, there's a fellow named Alan Gary. He started a cable vision company. He sold it for several $100 million. And with some of that money, he bought the town of Bethel. He just bought it. And you know, you could say, well, why are you saying he just bought it? Well, we can all read. And the document that his lawyers developed said, we, the Gary Foundation, are allowed to have a mass gathering. We're allowed to have as many people as we want. And on the weekend that we do that, which happens to be the Woodstock weekend, nobody else can have a mass gathering. And if anybody challenges that law, my lawyers are going to pay the town of Bethel to defend it. Not only will my lawyers defend me, they'll defend the town, and they'll pay all the money through me that it takes for that defense. You give me a monopoly, and I'll defend it. Now, it sounds to me like Alan Gary bought the town of Bethel. And in doing that, what he said to all of you, and Roy and Jerry, who own this wonderful piece of land, is you can't gather. You can't sing. You can't talk about politics. The only one who can do that in the town of Bethel on this historic weekend is me. Now, the people who stood up against that were Roy and Jerry, the people whose land you're on. And they said, and you should give them a big round of applause because they're putting their ass on the line for all of you. Now, they said in the federal court case where I happen to have the privilege of representing them, we can't have a country, because you know, what's a country made of? It's made of what happens here, what happens here, what happens there. That's what the country's made of, all these little instances, these little events. And in their little place of the world, Alan Gary was buying the government. And you know what? If Alan Gary can buy the government in the town of Bethel, then anybody with money can buy the government wherever the hell they want to buy the government, right? So Roy and Jerry said, you're not buying the government here because it's against the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, which still exists, for one party to be preferred by government, to buy that preference, then to pay for the defense of that preference. That's not a government under law. That's a government based on money, corruption, power of one person. We're not going to stand for it. Now, on August 30th of this year, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be in the Federal Court of Appeals trying to vindicate that constitutional principle. I'm going to invite everybody here, however they're dressed here, to come to the Court of Appeals dressed just that way. And let the Court of Appeals down in Lower Manhattan at 40 Foley Square near Chambers Street, near Mayor Giuliani's house, let them hear from you. Let them understand there are still Americans who care about the defense of freedom, about inequality, not simply people who want to come have a party on 3 days. Because, you know, August 31st, thank you. My wife remembers the day better than I do. August 31st at 10 o'clock. Now, we're here today for a political rally. we're here to hear some music, but the music is secondary to the political rally because, you know, without politics and without the right politics, they're going to shut down this music. And they're going to make the people playing this music criminals. Everybody here better understand that very clearly, what's at stake. You can play your music in your own house, but what happens when you want to come together and play your music together and invite your friends? And let's say you're so good that more than 5,000 people want to come together to hear you. You have to apply for a permit. And the people in charge of giving a permit don't want to give you a permit. They don't like your music. They don't like your shirts. They don't like your message. So what do they say? Only one person gets a permit this weekend. And that's not the America any of us want. But unless we fight against it, it's the America we're all going to get. Now, I want to speak today about some broader themes because, you know, this instance of repression is not isolated. Anyone who thinks that what's happening here is all that's happening is wrong. It's not all that's happening. It's one thing that's happening. In New York State, currently, there is a higher percentage of black males over the age of 18 years old in prison than in college. Do I have to repeat that for any of you? There is a higher proportion of black and Spanish males over the age of 18 in New York State today in prison than in college. Now that's a sickening state of affairs. It's a sickening state of affairs because what it tells us is we're spending our money to incarcerate people, human beings, often in inhumane conditions, and we're not spending that money to help them develop their potential in this world. That's a state of affairs we can't stand if we're going to have a future as one society. But it's a state of affairs we are tolerating and standing. Now, how is that related to what we're doing here today? It's related because the message from 1969, which we still advocate, is a message of equality. It's a message of opportunity. It's a message against racism. It's a message against sexism. That's the message, that's the meaning, that's the content. And what we each have to ask ourselves today, as we ask every day, is what are we doing to achieve that message and to make it real? We're not doing enough. None of us are doing enough. And the dedication that we take from this weekend is to do more. That's why this is a political event. It's an event intended to inspire our spirit and to give us an understanding of what we have in common. For us to fight together for basic principles, not just selfishly, this is what I care about, but this is what's important, this is what someone else cares about, and I'll lend my energy to that, knowing that next week that entity will lend its energy to me. It's that sharing of energy, it's that sharing of commitments which will allow us to make change. And change we need to make. Now, Jeryl Abramson is putting herself on the line this November. A new political party is formed, the Wanna Party. Wanna what? You know what we want to do. We want freedom. We want an end to this oppressive, selective buying of government. We want an end to a situation where a few people get the profits that many people generate. That's what we want. A very simple set of demands. And Jeryl is forwarding those demands right here in this little town. And I'm suggesting to you who are from this town to get behind Jeryl. If you don't support Jeryl, either actively, with your neighbors, with your friends, you're supporting somebody else. The saying that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem obtains right here today in Bethel. So I'm going to wish all of you to have a wonderful weekend about politics. About the politics of the resistance to a machine that is still spending much more money on imprisoning people than on educating people. A machine that would like to have killed Mumia, the journalist in Philadelphia who's exposing the truth, the revolting truth about how moved men and women and children were killed for no good reason in the middle of that urban center. Philadelphia would like to execute him yesterday. The state of Pennsylvania would like to deny him a new trial 100 times. And it's for us to expose these injustices wherever they are and to continue our momentum in fighting them. and not simply to lull ourselves into sleep and act like they don't exist. So I wish you a delightful weekend of political protest, of protest against that machine in all its forms. Thank you all. These are awesome people here. I have to